Greetings and welcome to the second video in a series of videos on creating column charts in Microsoft Excel. This video builds upon the contents of the first video in the series, providing some tips and some alternative techniques for creating column charts. If you want to see the first video in the series before starting this one, either click the card somewhere on the right side of the video or click the link in the video description below. So let's get started with our first tip. Tip 1. If the number of columns selected is greater than or equal to the number of rows selected, then Excel uses the labels in the columns for the category access labels. Let's look at an example by selecting the cells A1 to G5. 1. Select the cells A1 to G5. Observe that the number of selected columns in this example is 7 and the number of selected rows is 5. 2. On the ribbon, click the Insert tab. 3. On the Insert ribbon, click the Column Chart button. 4. On the Column Chart menu, click the Clustered Column Chart. The chart appears on the worksheet. Let's drag it underneath the dataset. On the chart, notice that the categories on the category axis correspond to the categories in the columns on the worksheet. Excel chooses the categories from the columns because the number of columns, 7 in our example, is greater than or equal to the number of rows, 5. Tip 2. If the number of selected columns is less than the number of selected rows, then Excel uses the row labels for the labels on the category axis. Let's look at an example by selecting the cells A1 to C5. 1. Select the cells A1 to C5. Observe that the number of selected columns, in this example, is 3, and the number of selected rows is 4. 2. On the ribbon, click the Insert tab. 3. On the Insert ribbon, click the Column Chart button. 4. On the Column Chart menu, click the Clustered Column Chart. The chart appears on the worksheet. Let's move the chart underneath the dataset. On the chart, notice that the categories on the category axis correspond to the labels in the rows. Excel chooses the categories from the rows because the number of selected columns, 3 in our example, is less than the number of selected rows, 5. Tip 3. Always select the column labels and the row labels along with your data. If you don't select the column labels and the row labels, Excel will not include them on the chart. Let's look at 2 examples. In the first example, let's select the cells B2 through G4. Observe that none of the selected cells include either the column labels or the row labels. 2. On the ribbon, click the Insert tab. 3. On the Insert ribbon, click the Column Chart button. 4. On the Column Chart menu, click the Clustered Column Chart. There are 2 themes to observe about the chart. First, the category axis labels are just numbers from 1 to 6. Also, in the legend, notice that the data series are identified as Series 1, Series 2, and Series 3. Both in the case of the category axis label and in the case of the data series, Excel creates placeholders for the missing labels. Now let's select the cells from A1 to G4, which includes labels for both the columns and for the rows. 1. Select the cells A1 to G4. 2. On the ribbon, click the Insert tab. 3. On the Insert ribbon, click the Column Chart button. 4. On the Column Chart menu, click the Clustered Column Chart. Notice Excel included the column labels on the category axis because cells containing labels were selected. Also observe that the legend uses the row labels to identify the data series because the row labels were selected. Tip 4. Sometimes you might discover that you need category labels from a dataset's columns for the chart, but the chart has category labels from the dataset's rows. Or it might be that the chart has category labels from rows and you need the category labels from the columns. For example, the chart on the screen takes its categories from the rows. However, we need to provide a client with a chart with categories from the columns. Let's see how we can resolve this issue. 1. Click the chart. 2. On the ribbon, locate the Design tab. 3. On the ribbon, click the Design tab. 4. On the Design ribbon, locate the Switch Row Column button. 4. Click the Switch Row Column button. Observe that Excel swaps the row and columns, causing the Excel to use the column labels for the category access labels. Tip 5. If the dataset includes either a total column or a total row, it is a good practice not to include either in the data selection. First, a total column or a total row represents a total of all the individual categories, and is not a category itself, but a summary of the categories. Second, totals will distort the chart. Let's look at two charts. The chart on the left does not include total sales for Computers for Michigan, and the one on the right includes the total sales of Computers for Michigan. If we glance at the chart on the right, it looks like the firm sold very few computers compared with the chart on the left. Indeed, by looking at the chart on the right, one might be tempted to say that the firm was not doing very well. It is only after a more detailed look at the chart on the right that we see that the two charts are providing the same information. Only the one on the right requires a much closer look to get an accurate understanding of the firm's sales. Tip 6. Select only the series that you need for the chart. For example, if you need to display only the Ohio and Minnesota data series, select only those rows. Observe that the Ohio data series and the Minnesota data series are not adjacent to one another. Let's see how to select those rows that are not adjacent to one another. 1. Select the cells A1 to G1. 2. On the keyboard, press and hold down the Control key. 3. Select cells A3 through G3. Keep holding down the Control key. 4. Select the cells A7 to G7. Release the Control key. 5. On the ribbon, click the Insert tab. 6. On the Insert ribbon, click the Column Chart button. 7. On the Chart menu, click the Clustered Column Chart. The chart appears on the worksheet. Let's move the chart underneath the dataset. 8. Let's deselect a chart by clicking somewhere on the worksheet. There are two important things to remember when working with data series that are not adjacent to each other. 1. Select the cells containing the labels for the category access. 2. Hold down the Control key while selecting each of the data series. Tip 7. If you need to select a large number of adjacent rows or columns, use the Shift key to constrain the selection area. Let's look at an example by selecting the cells A1 to D5. 1. Click cell A1. 2. On the keyboard, hold down the Shift key. 3. Click cell D5. Observe that Excel selects the region between cell A1 and cell D5. 4. On the ribbon, click the Insert tab. 5. On the Insert ribbon, click the Column Chart button. On the Column Chart menu, click the first chart, the Clustered Column Chart. The chart appears on the worksheet. Let's drag the chart underneath the dataset. 7. Deselect the chart by clicking somewhere on the worksheet. Tip 8. If you need to chart a summary column or a summary row, the technique is very similar to the one described in Tip 6. For example, if we need to chart the total column for the states, 1. Select the cells A1 to A7. 2. On the keyboard, press and hold down the Control key. 3. Select the cells H1 to H7. 4. On the ribbon, click the Insert tab. 5. On the Insert ribbon, click the Column Chart button. 6. On the Column Chart menu, click the Clustered Column Chart. A nice column chart of the total sales of computers for each state appears on the worksheet. The next two tips reverse the procedure followed in earlier examples by inserting the chart first and then adding the data to it. Tip 9. This tip shows you how to create a chart by using copy and paste. 1. On the ribbon, click the Insert tab. 2. On the Insert ribbon, click the Column Chart button. 3. On the Column Chart menu, click the Cluster Column Chart. A blank chart appears on the worksheet. For this demonstration, let's move the chart by dragging it underneath the dataset. 4. Select the data for the chart. In this example, let's select the cells A1 to C7. 5. On the ribbon, if necessary, click the Home tab. 6. On the Home ribbon, click Copy. If you're comfortable with right-clicking the selected cells and then clicking Copy, please feel free to copy the data that way as well. You could also, on the keyboard, press the Control key and the C key at the same time. On the worksheet, click the blank chart. 7. If necessary, click the Home tab. 8. On the Home ribbon, click the Paste button. If you're comfortable with right-clicking the chart and then clicking Paste, please feel free to paste the data that way. You could also, on the keyboard, press the Control key and the V key at the same time. Our chart comes out perfectly. You can use the same technique when you select data using the Control key. Tip 10. The final way to create a chart is to use the Select Data Source dialog box. 1. On the ribbon, click the Insert tab. 2. On the Insert ribbon, click the Column Chart button. 3. On the Column Chart menu, click the Clustered Column Chart. A blank chart appears on the worksheet. For this demonstration, let's move the chart underneath the dataset. 4. If the blank chart is not selected, then click the blank chart. On the ribbon on the right side, two new tabs appear under Chart Tools, the Design tab and the Format tab. 5. If the Design ribbon is not visible, then on the ribbon, click the Design tab. 6. On the Design ribbon, locate the Select Data button. 7. On the Design ribbon, click the Select Data button. The Select Data Source dialog box appears. 8. Locate the Chart Data Range text box. Notice on the right side of the text box a downward pointing arrow with a line underneath it. This button is the Collapse button and allows us to select data for the chart using a mouse. 9. Click the Collapse button. The dialog box disappears. Observe on the far right side of the Collapse dialog box the blue down pointing arrow underneath a line. This button is the Expand button. Let's select the cells A1 to G2 and A4 to G4. 10. Using the mouse, select the cells A1 to G2. The next set of cells are not adjacent to cells A1 through G2, so we'll need to do a little trick. 11. On the keyboard, type a comma. The comma tells Excel that the next set of cells is not adjacent to the current selection. 12. Using the mouse again, select the cells A4 to G4. 13. On the far side of the Collapse Select Data Source dialog box, click the Expand button. The Select Data Source dialog box returns to its normal size. 14. Click the OK button. If you're uncomfortable using the Control key to select non-adjacent rows or columns for the data series, this is a very good alternative. The video on editing the chart's data series demonstrates some different ways to access the Select Data Source dialog box. Bonus tip 1. An embedded chart is a chart that appears on a worksheet with the data source or other charts. Here's an example of an embedded chart. Observe the data set and other charts on the same worksheet. Here's a quick way to create an embedded chart. 1. Select the data for the chart. In our example, let's select A1 to G6. 2. On the keyboard, press the Alt key and the F1 key at the same time. Now, isn't that a fast method for creating a chart? Bonus tip 2. A worksheet chart is a chart that appears on its own worksheet without a dataset or other charts. Here's an example of a worksheet chart. Observe that the chart takes up the whole worksheet. Here's a quick way to create a worksheet chart. 1. Select the data for the chart. In our example, let's select cell A1 to cell G6. 2. On the keyboard, press the F11 key. Now, isn't that a quick way to create a chart? Both methods generate a cluster column chart. Excel assigns the cluster column chart as the program's default chart. However, it is possible to change the default chart. A video later in the series will show you how to change Excel's default chart. Many of the tips in this video apply to the line chart, the column chart, and the bar chart. This video demonstrated some tricks and tips for creating a cluster column chart. The video demonstrated how to select the data to control whether Excel uses the row labels or the column labels for the category axis. The video also showed how to select non-adjacent rows and columns for the data series. In addition, it offered some advice about not choosing total rows or total columns when selecting rows for the chart's data series. Finally, the video showed several alternative methods for creating a clustered column chart. In the next video in the series looks at how to edit the data series of a chart. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the comment section below. Until the next video, best wishes!